Hello again. Welcome to Coffee and Conversation for ESL Listening. I'm Danielle.
And I'm Christina. So grab a cup and join the conversation.
Hey there. How's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
Good. Everything's going well. Here I've got a cat that's going to be in the way. I hope she doesn't make any noise today because she's been a little crazy lately. But other than that, we're good.
I think she should be part of our podcast team because she's
Yes,
there every time.
she is. She's the unofficial host,
Yes.
co-host. Anyway, so we're going to talk today about jobs, careers, things like that. I don't know about you, but I have a lot of students that are living in the United States and they're looking for jobs and they have a lot of questions about, what jobs are like here. And one day we should actually talk about interviewing and resumes and things like that. I think that would be kind of interesting. But for
Yeah.
today, we're just going to talk about just general jobs and experiences and dream jobs. Dream jobs. We all have those, right?
I think so. I think everybody has a dream job one way or another.
Yeah, and it's usually not the one they're doing.
Oh, yeah, for the most. Yeah, most of the time, I would say so.
Some people are lucky. Yeah, some people are doing their dream job. Um, but there's always those jobs that you think like, wow, in another lifetime, it would be really cool if I could do, such and such thing. If money were not an object, like if you didn't have to think about actually earning a living, making a salary. But
Right.
unfortunately, that's usually part of it. We all
Yeah,
need
that's
that.
true. Yeah. So
Yeah.
do you have a dream job?
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll talk about my dream jobs when I was a kid because
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
I think my dreams have probably changed over the years, and probably yours have too. I don't know. Some people I know, they knew from a very young age they wanted to do one specific profession, and they just studied and they went for it, and that was it. But not me. I was always like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, and you know.
Right.
So yeah, when I was a kid, I wanted to do something. I was really into mysteries and things like that.
Mm.
So I wanted to be like a private detective, and I was going to solve mysteries. You know?
Oh, that's cool. Wow. That's really cool. my, my job that I wanted to do when I was a kid wasn't that cool, actually.
It was what?
um, it wasn't that cool.
It wasn't, well,
The
I don't
job
know
that
how
I
cool
wanted
this
to do when I
was,
was a
but
kid. Actually, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a pharmacist.
oh, really? That's
Yes.
actually pretty interesting. Like, where did that come from?
Well, I remember it, but I remember also my parents always telling me, like when I was already, grown up, and they said when I used to play with my dolls and toys, I would always pretend that I was a pharmacist. I would make this medicine, like that
Oh,
my dolls would be sick and I would be taking care of them, and I would make these different types of herbal teas and this medicine.
that's
Yeah.
adorable.
Yeah, so I think I remember wanting to be a pharmacist. I mean, they said that maybe I wanted to also be a nurse because I like to take care of my dolls, but I think it was a pharmacist. But then, like you said, things change and like our dream jobs change. Later on, I remember I wanted to be a teacher.
Okay.
Um,
That was
yes,
convenient.
yes, yeah, but things have changed too. So, so you always want. You said that you kind of changed it. You wanted to be a detective, but then there's some other things. Are there any other jobs you wanted to do when you were a kid or as you were growing up?
Yeah, as I got a little bit older, I thought, well, I've had a lot of thoughts of being my own boss. And so a lot of things I wanted to do involved not having to work for anyone. Um,
Hmm.
yeah. So one thing that I wanted to do was have my own club, like a dance
Like,
club kind of thing.
whoa.
Yeah. And I was going to have, not something really trendy, not trendy at all. It was going to be something cool and maybe vintage or, throwback, old school kind of thing, cool older music. Yeah.
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 So it seems like that not having a boss and being your own boss or working for yourself kind of came true to you for
It
you.
did. It took a long time, let me tell you.
But it
Yes.
came, it became true. So very cool. So that means that you know what, the dance club, that might still happen.
Yeah, no, I think that ship has sailed. That's okay.
I love I love that idiom, the ship has sailed.
Yes.
And that means that that's long gone. It's not gonna
It's
happen.
yeah, it's, in the far distance, it's gone. Yeah,
Yes.
bye-bye.
Yes. Oh,
But
that's
yeah,
funny.
related to that, I also
Mhm,
wanted to have me and my old school stuff and vintage things. I wanted to
mhm.
have a vintage clothing store.
I can absolutely see you
Can't you?
doing that.
Yeah. Right?
Absolutely.
I even
Yes.
had a name picked out for it.
What was it? What was it?
Okay, I got this, always something random from me. There was a movie, it's called Cabaret.
Okay.
And in that movie, there was a line where Liza Minnelli says she's got these green fingernails, long green fingernails, and she makes a comment about them. And she says, "Oh, yes, divine decadence." And yeah, and so I was like, that's a great name for a store, Divine Decadence.
It is a
Decadence being like, well, how do we define that? Because it's probably not a word that a lot of people would know. Just like excess and just
luxury, excess.
yeah, luxury, indulging in things that you like and you want.
Yes. Yeah. That
Yeah.
is, you know what? That is a wonderful name for the
Isn't
store.
it? I
Oh
liked
my
it.
gosh. I mean, I really think you should pursue this now.
Yeah, no, I again, ship has sailed.
I don't know. Maybe we can turn the ship around
Yeah.
and bring it
I
back.
don't know. But over the years, I kind of jumped back. Oh, the other thing I really wanted to do, and this kind
Mhm.
of goes back to my early dream job idea, is I wanted to be a forensic scientist. And I
Okay.
wanted to solve mysteries of like murders and crimes and, do DNA analysis and, all that kind of stuff. Again, you can
You
see
know,
this, right?
yes, yes, I can see that. And also based on the types of shows you like to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh,
Funny story about
mhm.
forensic scientists. In my current job or the place I work at, we did this. We used to do that with our students to find their interests, to see what type of job matches their
Yeah.
interests, like interest in inventory, they call it, or something like that. So I did one
Oh,
with the
cool.
students, and you'll never guess what was the number one job that matches my interest and personality that came up.
Teacher.
Forensic scientist.
Oh, no, really? Forensic scientist?
Forensic scientist. Yes. But
What?
it kind of explains because I am a curious person who always asks why.
Yeah, me too.
And I like to dig to the bottom of it, as they
Yeah.
say. Like I like to find out the causes of things, the reasons, like all the details and all that. So sometimes even at work when there's some sort of an issue, people will ask me to look into it because they like I like to investigate stuff and try
Yeah,
to
see,
figure out what happened.
investigating. Yeah.
So I was like, okay, that makes sense. At first I was like, that would have what? No, that actually makes sense.
That's
So
really
now
good.
I'm thinking maybe this whole
We've
thing
got a
of working.
career plan for later
I
on. We
know.
can be a
I mean,
team.
yes, it checks the boxes for us. Plus, working for ourselves, no
Yeah.
boss, no.
Hey.
can have our own detective agency.
You know what? Maybe I was wrong. Maybe that ship hasn't sailed. Maybe that's our sunset cruise.
Sunset.
I don't
Oh
know,
my
man.
god. Oh, but I mean, interesting,
That's
isn't
really
it?
funny. Yes, it's so funny.
That's hilarious. All
Cool,
right.
cool. Any other dream jobs that you had? I had so many, I swear.
I did too. Like I wanted to be a go into space. I wanted to be an astronaut, like a woman, one of the
Oh,
few women that went into space. I wanted to be a commander of Starfleet Academy. I wa- I had
that's
so
great.
many. I At one point in time in my life, I wanted to be a politician,
Oh,
and I was
ooh.
so serious about it that my parents actually had to talk me out of it.
Oh, good
And
plan.
that's when I went to study languages.
Yeah,
And when I started, I remember in college, um, when I went to Uzbekistan for those 3 months to study there with our group, and I interned. I had an internship at the embassy there.
cool.
And you know what? After that, I really, really wanted to be a diplomat. I wanted to be an ambassador or something like that to work for a consulate. And I still do. It's one of my jobs that I think it probably will never happen in my life, but it's still in the back of my mind that maybe one day I
You
will be a
know,
diplomat.
I got to tell you though, I could actually see this about you
Really?
because I think that you have that diplomatic kind of personality where, we were in situations before and the rest of us are like "Arr," getting annoyed and this is ridiculous, and you'd be calming everybody down and kind of working both sides of the issue, and everybody would kind of settle down and everything would be fine. So yeah,
Mhm.
I could see that.
Well, thanks. I for some reason, I maybe it's something like I like people to be happy. I don't like
Yeah.
conflict.
Yes.
So, but we will see. We'll see what happens in the future.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting. I'm learning so much about you.
We've known each other for how many years, and I've learned
Yeah.
so much about you in the last few minutes.
I know, right? Exactly. So, this is a little bit off topic, but not exactly. I'm curious, and I'm sure the listeners would be curious too. At what age did you start learning English?
So the first time I started learning English at school, I believe it was third grade, and
Okay.
it was once a week for an hour. We had a class, and I still remember the teacher to this day. Her name was
Oh, that's
Mrs.
funny.
Lydia. Um, so it's kind of like that's when slowly I started learning English. Just the simple, basic, but I really like the fact that I am able to learn another language, and it wasn't difficult. But by then I already spoke another language because I kind of, I grew up speaking Ukrainian,
Hmm.
reading, writing, speaking. I mean, that was my language. But also because I was growing up during Soviet Union times, a lot of the things were also in Russian. So, like a lot
Right.
of TV programs, a lot of books I read. I never learned, how you learn a language? I never
Hmm.
learned Russian that way. It was just something I grew up with and I just knew it.
And you kind of picked it up by ear. Yeah.
You just naturally do it because this is how it is. This is the environment. So then my grandparents were Polish and I heard Polish language a lot. And because I used to live closer, like in the part of Ukraine that's closer to Polish border, a lot of the words we used in everyday conversation were kind of like a Polish dialect, kind of, a lot of just the vocabulary words were
Right.
infused in the language in that area of the country. So again, I never learned how to speak Polish, but I can understand
Yeah.
most of the when people speak Polish, and I can read some too. But I remember this one time, somebody called my grandfather, and I picked up the phone, and they were speaking Polish, and I could understand everything, but I couldn't say anything. Like, "Ah!" So, but third grade, I would say that was the very first time I started learning English.
Yeah, but probably you didn't start for real until maybe a little bit later. Yeah.
College.
College.
College is
Wow.
actually when, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I just kind of wanted to ask that, because eh, people who are listening and they think, "Oh gosh, I'll never get to speak English the way I want to." And it happens. It just takes a lot of time, a lot of practice, and yeah. So
Oh,
anyway, I was just curious
it's very,
about that.
yeah, it's very possible. Absolutely. If
Yes,
I can do it, anyone can do it.
absolutely. All right. So we've talked about dream jobs pretty much. I think let's get down to reality.
Pom pom pom.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, maybe you have I don't know if you had a lot of jobs in your life. I've had a lot of different jobs. How about you?
I wouldn't say I had a lot of different jobs. I mean, in college, I started tutoring in English, like children, or
Mhm.
even there was a nonprofit organization I worked for, and they provided English lessons to kids or like business people who needed to study like business English. So that would be kind of the story through my whole life. There's some sort of English was involved and teaching.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
so that's good.
right. But then when I moved to the United States, my first job here, so I volunteered at school again, helping teaching and all that. But then my first job, the actual job here, I worked at a retail job. I worked at a small women's store, like a boutique,
Okay.
selling things and all that. And then I worked at the bank,
Oh,
and I think I worked at preschool. So I didn't have that many different jobs, but there were some that are kind of different. You think like, how did you go from teaching to this? So, what about you? I'm sure you have
yeah,
some
I
interesting.
worked at a lot of colleges and universities before I ever even started teaching. I mean, I just
Ooh,
worked in administration offices, and some were better than others.
yeah,
you know, yeah, because this is going to be my next question for you. But so I had uh, a lot of jobs that were like, they were okay, but boy, I had one really terrible job.
well, tell us,
Yeah.
everybody who's listening,
Everybody
what?
wants to know about this terrible job.
Oh
Yeah,
yes.
and the thing is, I learned something from this job, though. There are no totally bad experiences. You always learn something from it. And I worked at this college. I'm sure these people aren't listening now, but so they won't know. But even if they are, they need to know that they were terrible. Um, yeah, and I worked for this woman who was very well respected in the college because she brought in a lot of money.
Mhm.
And so everyone was just kind of like tiptoeing around her, trying to make her happy. But she was mean. She was so mean. And everybody in the whole department was just on edge all the time. And we're like, okay, who is it going to be that she's going to attack next? And I knew when I first started working there, the very first day, I said to myself, I think I went home in tears and I was like, oh my gosh, I made a mistake. And in fact, somebody that worked there told me, he saw me in the elevator and he said, so and so, she's my friend, known her for 15 years, but I wouldn't work for her if you paid me $1 million. So I knew I was in trouble.
Oh,
Yeah. But so I said, you learn things, right? And I stayed there too long. I stayed there a year and a couple of weeks. And I learned that don't put up with something to being mistreated or being miserable. There's other jobs. Don't suffer.
right. Well, and in this situation, was it necessarily the job itself or the person you worked for?
No, it was her. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And all of the staff, it was like they were dead inside. They were just all miserable because she was miserable. And so it was just an ugly every day I went to work and I thought, oh, and like, oh, but the pay is good. I don't want to leave. But yeah. No, don't stay where you're being mistreated. That's my advice.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I hope you didn't have a bad experience like that.
I don't think I've ever had that bad of an experience in terms of working for somebody who was treating you this badly. I would say the job itself, when I worked, there was a period of time here in the United States, I worked at the bank. And at that time, it looked like a good opportunity, and um, not a bad pay and all that. But I absolutely hated working at the bank.
Yeah,
And it
I
wasn't necessarily the people. I mean, one of the managers there was pretty rough. But it wasn't necessarily the people I worked with, it was the job itself. And one of the things that really was horrible for me is, you have to sell things to customers like credit cards and bank
oh,
accounts.
I hate that
And
kind of
I
stuff.
just hated that part because I don't like bothering people and selling things and telling them you need to get the credit card or you need. I hated that. It was so bad. And then they would make this big competition out of it because, they have to get
Yeah.
numbers and accounts and all that. And I get it. It's the nature of the field.
Yeah.
But it
That's how
was
you
not
make the
my
money.
cup of tea. It
Yeah.
was not.
And
I,
did they make you do like a spiel, like a set
yes.
thing that you have to say these words and then the people are like, no, thank you, no, thank you. And you have to keep talking because you're required to say these words?
Usually by the time they say no, thank you, I can kind of back out and
Okay, okay. Yeah.
but it was, yeah, the whole competition about it and then the numbers and all that. I was like, I just can't do this. Plus, that's when I realized that my heart has been in education and
Yeah.
that's where it needs to go back. After that job, I worked
Follow
at the
your heart.
preschool.
Yeah.
Yes, still wasn't the most ideal educational job. The preschool, I liked it. I liked working with kids, but again, the the politics, like there's another,
Yeah.
it's a good vocabulary word actually, office politics or job politics, where
Yes.
there's all these intrigues, or I don't know, some people like other people or not those, so there's just all that that I really am not a big fan of.
Yeah, that's the worst for me. I mean, I was very lucky that when I worked, where you work now, there were good people around, and for sure, you and I got along great, and we didn't have any of that crazy drama. So
Mhm.
that was very nice. So yeah, that would say that was one of my very positive working experiences. Yeah. So
Yep.
you know what? One thing that it kind of made me think of right now is that there's a word that we hear a lot of lately, and that's about work life balance. I guess that's a phrase,
Mm,
work
that's
life
good.
balance. And sometimes we can work really hard and get so involved. Sometimes you might say you're a workaholic. You're just constantly working, working, working. And then you kind of don't have time for your family, for your things that you
Social life, yeah.
social life, things that are, that are interesting to you or something that is important for you. So
Right.
if you don't get that work life balance, saying, putting those boundaries to say, okay, I'm not going to work overtime if
Right.
every time you ask me, I'm not going to kill myself over this project. You can get burned out in the end. um,
You could easily, and it also goes back to who is in charge,
yes.
how they allow people to, or how much work do you want to do on your own? And because I went through time when I worked three jobs. I had a
Oh,
job right during the day and then at night. And so in the end, by the time you get home at 9 p.m., because you left the house at 7 a.m.,
oh,
you
yuck.
get burned out. But I mean,
Yeah.
so there's that side of it, being workaholic, or there's if you kind of have a boss like you were talking about in that terrible job, that just makes you do things and put more hours because they want you to complete projects no matter how many hours it takes for you because they have their own deadline. So but I've been pretty fortunate. At the place I am now, I've been there for 14 years. but I had different positions, different jobs. Yes,
Yeah,
can you
you
believe it?
did. You've pretty much covered it all there.
And we started. Do you remember we started the same year
We
there?
did. I think I started like a month before you or something
Yes.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. We did
So
our
I
training together.
did. I do remember that. But I have been fortunate actually because the people I worked for, have always encouraged that work-life balance.
Yeah, it's really
And
important.
knowing, especially like when people have families and children and, things come up. But I was never forced or it was never implied that you make sure put extra hours or
Yeah.
what else. Never ever. So it is
Yeah,
important.
and I remember also being in certain jobs where I would feel guilty if I was sick. I mean, legitimately sick, and I would have to call in and I would try to say, "Okay, maybe I'll feel better," and no, I can't do it. I have to call in. And then I would feel like I've done something wrong, and that's
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah.
And I have a couple of instances for that. One time I called in sick, and I remember my job was about 35 minutes away from home, so I commuted. And I remember I called in sick very first time after working there for, I don't know, a year or so. And I was pretty sick. There was no way I was going to drive 35 minutes and try to, work or anything. So I called in sick, and my supervisor said, "Well, how sick are you?" And I
Sick enough
remember
to be calling
saying,
in.
that's what I said, sick enough not to be able to drive to work. So, but then another instance was
What a
when
ridiculous
I worked at
question.
when I worked at preschool, and I think I had actually flu at that time when I called in. I didn't want to be around children or anybody else to get them sick, right? But I understand. I mean, I understand. Like you said, you always feel guilty about it, and you know that you
Yeah.
put hardship on your coworkers. But when I called in, and I told my boss that I was sick and I have flu, and she said, "Well, that's fine. You
That's
stay
fine.
home. I will just rearrange things and I will not have my lunch today so I can fill in." And so, trying to make you feel
Martyr.
bad and yes, and make you feel guilty,
Yeah.
just not a good leadership, just not a good
No,
thing to be at
it
work.
really
So,
isn't.
yeah,
I
right.
mean, you get those sick days and
For
you're
a
allowed
reason.
to use them, you know? So,
Right.
and by the way, I realize we've been saying a lot
Yes.
of vocabulary here, and especially this phrasal verb call in. I was going
Yeah.
to talk about that later, but since we've said it a few times here, um, that's a really good phrasal verb to know. When you actually, this is not when you've planned a day off or something like that. This is when you wake up in the morning and you say, for whatever reason, either an emergency or I'm sick or something, and you have to
Mhm.
call and say, I can't come to work today. So you can say call in sick, or you can just say call in. And I
Right.
think, if I'm not mistaken, I think some places it could be a regional thing. Sometimes they say call off sick, or call out sick. I
Yeah,
think I've
that's
heard
true. I
all
think
of
that,
those things.
yeah, yeah.
But the
The
idea is
other
the same.
thing well, the other thing you brought up was the sick days,
Mm-hmm.
which is another good. I mean, we probably can have another episode just talking about the benefits and all that at work.
Yeah, right.
But it's something that it's a paid day where you can, when you're sick and you call in or call off, you don't have to go to work, but you have that you won't lose your pay for that day.
Yeah,
So that's kind of it's a benefit, one of the work benefits.
yeah, for sure. And speaking of benefits, obviously it's very important that we get a salary that is good for us, that, we can live, survive. Um,
Yep.
but then sometimes, well, pretty much most jobs, I would assume, come with some kind of extra perks.
Mhm.
And perks are those extra benefits that you get with a job that are not necessarily, money, cash in hand kind of thing, but it's something that makes the job more appealing. Like, oh, yes,
Right.
you'll want to come here because we've got these perks.
Right.
Yeah. I never really had a job with many perks, now that I think about it.
Well,
What
I
kind of
mean, when
perks?
you
Oh, I got one. I've got one. Yes. I said that I worked at a lot of colleges and universities. And one of the really good perks of working there is that you can quite often take classes for free. So,
oh,
yeah,
that's true. Yep.
that's a perk.
I have that perk at my job right now.
Oh, yeah.
Um, so a perk that I have at my job is so I do have benefits. I have health insurance, time off, like
Sure.
vacation time, sick time, holidays, but I have additional perk where between Christmas and New Year's that week,
Oh,
I the college is closed, so I get time off during that time.
yes. That's beautiful.
It's always nice.
Love it. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's one, this could be another topic too, but teaching can be a hard job, but fortunately there are some perks like that that you have those dedicated weeks off that you can actually do stuff because for our listeners who are not in the United States, most jobs in the US do not have the kind of time off that you get in, say, Europe. I know Europe is very generous with a lot of
Yes.
time off and other perks that we don't get. We won't get into that now, but a lot of times here it's difficult to take vacation because you just don't have that time. So,
Right.
at least in the teaching world, you have a little bit more time. I mean, you don't get paid for it, but but you at least you
You have
have
some time.
that opportunity for that work life balance.
That's right. Work life balance.
Work life balance. All right. Well, we're coming up on some time here that we probably need to wrap this up. There's another nice phrasal verb for you. Wrap it up. I'm going to bring this to a close here. I wanted to mention a couple of phrasal verbs that are very common related to jobs and professions and things like that. We already talked about call in, call off, call out, whatever you want to say. I tend to say call in. You too?
I do too.
Yeah.
Somebody calls in or I call in. Yeah.
Called in, yeah, and you don't even have to
Hmm.
say I called in sick, you just say I called in,
Hmm.
it's clear that's what you're doing.
Yep.
Another thing that people have gotten confused, I've noticed, is, like, they'll tell me, a story about their job where they or somebody else got fired, and then
Oh,
when I dig into it a little bit more and I ask some questions, I realize, no, they didn't actually get fired, but they got laid off.
laid off.
And it's a
That's a
big
good, yeah,
difference between firing and laying off someone.
that's right.
Firing, you did something bad, they want you out.
Yep.
And layoff has to do with financial reasons that they have to, another thing we say is let you go.
Right. And it could be that maybe the position is not there anymore or the
Right.
company is not doing well and they have to, have some people leave because they can't pay them. But the other difference too, like when you are fired, you probably will not get hired again at that place in the
That's
future.
true. Yeah.
But when you're laid off, you could get hired again there.
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah, if things start improving or situations
Right.
change. Yeah, sure.
Right.
Okay, another one, we talked about burnout too. We said that already, but we didn't explain it. And that's a really good one when you work so hard and you're just like every day, every week, just putting in all your energy. And after a while, you're like, ugh, I can't do it anymore. Kind of like a candle, the
You
flame
burn
burns
out. Yep.
out and you're done. Can't
You
do it
just have
anymore.
no energy left. You just don't,
Mhm.
you can't be creative. You can't, it's harder. It becomes harder to do your job when you burn
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is not a phrasal verb, but I thought this was a good expression to end with. This is one of my favorites. Sometimes we say when we want to wrap things up for the day and go home and say, let's stop working, we'll pick it up again tomorrow, but for today, let's call it a day,
Oh, I like that.
right? That's a good one. I say that a lot. Let's call it a day. That means, okay, we're done. We're going to stop here, you know, go home. We'll start again tomorrow.
Most of the time I just say, and I'm out of here.
I'm, I'm a head out.
I'm gonna head out. So yes, let's call it a day. That's a really good, like, to kind of finish. We're done for today. We're
Yep.
finished. Go
Yeah,
home.
let's call it a day.
Call it
Yeah.
a day. That's a
So
good
on
one.
that note, I think let's call it a day.
Yeah, good one. That was a good one.
Oh, but
Thanks
wait,
for
before we call it a day, I forgot to say, to remind everybody, show notes, show
Oh
notes. We'll have all of these expressions and phrasal verbs and whatnot that we talked about, and maybe some other little interesting tidbits. So be sure to download the show notes, and we will catch you next time.
yeah.
So until next time, here's to good coffee, good vibes, and great conversations.
Cheers.
Cheers.